Olá, tudo bem com vocês? Eu sou o Eduardo Gerac, jornalista, e vou conduzir agora uma conversa importante sobre energia e meio ambiente. Depois da crise sanitária, outro desafio talvez ainda maior para a humanidade seja o enfrentamento da crise climática. O embate, que precisa começar imediatamente e vai durar décadas, passa sem dúvida alguma pela eletricidade. Desde a geração, e as fontes limpas são as grandes armas nesse campo, até principalmente a sua utilização. É por isso que a tecnologia, a digitalização dos mais variados sistemas e a eficiência do uso da energia serão tão importantes daqui para frente, principalmente nas grandes cidades, onde evitar os desperdícios é essencial em qualquer planejamento que tenha como objetivo emitir menos carbono para a atmosfera. Por isso, hoje, estamos com dois especialistas no tema para entender mais como essa chamada eletricidade 4.0 pode ter um papel central na luta contra as mudanças climáticas globais. Eles vão nos ajudar a conhecer melhor as várias frentes onde a digitalização de determinados processos vai entregar resultados importantes para a sociedade. Estão conosco hoje, portanto, Felipe Delorme, vice-presidente executivo de gerenciamento de energia da Schneider Electric, direto de Hong Kong, e Rafael Segreira, presidente da Schneider Electric para a América do Sul, que fala aqui de São Paulo. Como nós temos hoje dois convidados internacionais, eu vou mudar então agora para o inglês. Philip, how are you? It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very, very happy to be with you.
Okay, my first question is about the electricity 4.0 concept. What is this, first of all, and why it's so relevant for Schneider Electric?
So the whole electricity 4.0 concept, starting with really the big race on climate change. I think we all hear about climate change. We all have heard about the COP26, the fact that today the planet is on a trajectory to go beyond 3 degrees, which might not look like a lot, but it's a lot, and it would have catastrophic impact on the whole climate. And the truth is, by 2030, we need all of us to stay within the 1.5 degree trajectory, which is really important. What we learned with COVID is that actually in 22, it was possible to reduce the carbon emission, 35 gigaton of carbon, by 7%. Now, the bad news is that in 21, those emissions have gone back to +5 to +7%. So basically, we've erased the year 2020, and we have now to be back to structural changes to make sure that we drive climate change to where it needs to be. And this climate change is very, very related to energy, because today 80% of carbon emission comes from either the production or the consumption of energy out of a system that's structurally very inefficient. So electricity 4.0 is a concept we've built to respond to that. And this concept basically unifies a more electric and a more digital world. So what do we mean? More electric means that we believe that all the energy generation should move to electric type of electricity generation, can be hydro, can be renewable, other source like wind, solar, in some case nuclear. All the usage of electricity should go to, of energy should go to electrical. That means that cars should go to green electricity, but also buildings should run now on electricity load and not loads that are operated with oil or gas. So that's one. And the second point is really driving digitization to help everyone, one, to understand where energy is being spent, second, to use the power of cloud and artificial intelligence to optimize real-time this energy consumption. When you combine a more electrical and a more digital world, that's where we believe we reach this electricity 4.0 world. And the great news is that when you look at solutions that would be available to drive this and to drive this energy reduction, to in the end drive systematically carbon reduction, we believe that 70 to 80% of the solutions do exist today. So we're not talking about science fiction and stuff like this. We are talking about very practical solutions. And at Schneider Electric, we believe electricity 4.0 is our core, because our core is related to sustainability. We've been, for 20 years, very, very focused on this goal of sustainability. 6 long-term goals, but a very important goal related to energy. We've been recognized last year as being the most sustainable company by Corporate Knights. Our mission is to be the digital partner for sustainability and efficiency. And we believe we've built today the ideal portfolio to respond to this major crisis, which is climate change, with solutions that drive the world that's more electrical and more digital, which we call Electricity 4.0.
Okay, thank you. It's a huge challenge that we have to face in this next months, next years, next decades. Okay, and Rafael, how are you? It's a pleasure to have joined us in this conversation too.
Obrigado, Eduardo. Very good, thank you.
So for you, my first question is about an important part of the world. Okay, so for Brazil and South America, now what's the potential for Electricity 4.0 concept?
Well, Eduardo, we know that in Brazil, factually, we have more than 80% of the electricity already coming from renewable sources, right? And 2/3 of this are coming from water, for hydro systems. And then you have the remaining with biomass and a combination of solar and wind, which is already very nice, right? When you look at the composition of the matrix in Brazil. And it's very similar in other countries of the region. Go to Colombia, basically is the same. We are very rich both in resources, and our privileged position in the world give us this opportunity. So if you go to Brazil, with this matrix that you have, and we observe also that in the last years, Brazil have been very dynamic on pushing for more renewables. We have a very nice condition, and this project, looking at the pipe, looking in the future, continue to be very good. So I will say that on the generation part, we are in the right path in Brazil, okay? And we observe this in a combination with global players and local players that is absorbing a lot of these technologies that Philip has been talking about. Now, if we move to the consumption, here the challenge, right? And we have data, the most recent studies of, the name is ABESCO, you know, this association for the Brazilian companies that are in the energy conservation. It shows that more than 52 billion in terms of reais are waste on energy. This is a lot of money, okay? So, and this waste is big part also of the responsible, I would say, of these emissions. So one thing that we need to be super conscious and we need to be super focused is on this part of the consumption. Phyllis says our mission is to be the partner for our customers, you know, to help them to be more sustainable and efficient. Here we're talking about the energy efficiency, the management of this consumption of the energy. So looking at this, basically we see big opportunities in Brazil, right? And another way to understand, I would say, the concept of Electricity 4.0 that Philip just mentioned is, you know, is electricity for zero emission, from zero waste, zero carbon. This is what we want. This concept make the visible invisible, right? The invisible, that is all the things that we don't see, we make it visible through the digital tools that we have. So basically, it's huge potential that we observe for Brazil, mostly in the consumption. You know, the commitment that Brazil have to be carbon neutral by 2050. This, you will have it only if we have more than 85% of the emissions of the generation of the electricity from renewables. And I think this will be met by Brazil, considering the current situation. I think the big challenge will be more on the consumption part.
Okay.
Or the big opportunity.
Okay, and in your point of view, the velocity of the transformations are good. So we have time to do all these transformations.
I'm afraid, Edu, no. The simple answer is no.
Okay.
The big challenge we have is the speed. And when we say this, We are very serious on this, right? Project to 2050 is very nice. We need to look now, 2010. I mean, 2030 is arriving in 10 years.
Okay.
So we need to accelerate. And when we say accelerate, we're talking not a little bit more percentage. We're talking 3 times, 5 times. And it's possible because the speed of the technologies, the availability of the technologies is there. So it's possible just with the right determination.
Okay. So in the world now, we are seeing an energy crisis. I hope that everybody agree with me about this. So in this context, Philip, what are the lessons to be learned from it?
Well, indeed, we see energy crisis popping up in many places, in China, in Europe. They are very often related to political things, but not only. They are also connected with the fact that the economy is restarting. And the first thing we are learning from this is that everyone needs energy. Everyone in the world, whether very developed countries or more developing economies, you cannot develop and you cannot aspire to a normal way of life without energy. So there is no doubt we need energy. Now, what needs to be done is making sure that on one side, we produce the greenest energy, which is everything that Raphael was talking about. Well, actually, a country like Brazil has a lot of opportunities there with hydro, but also with new sources of energy. But I would say one thing that people don't talk enough about is energy efficiency, number one. And number two, really moving the electrical usage to more efficient sources of energy, to more efficient loads of energy, which are really electrical. Take 2 examples. You take today a motor that will work with petrol, it's 30% efficient. An electrical motor is 95% efficient. So the first source of, say, energy efficiency is to move to electrical loads from oil and gas operated loads, number one. Number two, energy efficiency is just about making sure that in the first place, you don't need to operate that motor, or you don't need to operate that air conditioner, or you don't need to put on this light because, let's say, in a building, there is no one in the building. And when you travel in the center of Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo, you would see at night still a lot of buildings that are alive. So there is a massive opportunity in energy efficiency. We like to say the best watt is the negawatt, the watt you don't consume. And where people talk about a green future, a lot of things is being talked about as the supply side, the generation, but we don't talk enough about ways to really decarbonize the supply, the demand side, the point of usage, and save watts. These are things that are part again of Electricity 4.0, which really calls for deployment at scale of that concept and those principles and those very practical solutions.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let's talk about cities now. Let's change our thoughts a little bit. So for you, Raphael, what are the solutions to build net zero cities? A very simple question.
So look, I think all start from the top of the company, from the leadership of the company, and very pragmatic. When Philip was talking about our mission, also I'm back to the simple way. We need to check with our leaders, with the leaders of the company, where they have in their agenda, and if they have agenda. And I will not say, a big sustainability agenda. Let's be super pragmatic. Do you have an agenda to decarbonize your business, right? So I think the answer is when governments have an agenda to decarbonize their business, then we are in the right path. And decarbonize is very simple. You need to start for a base, right? What is your comparison base? So you need to measure what your emissions are, right? Yeah. So this is what we're doing. This is what we are really striving, helping our customer to make sure that they have the possibility to measure their emission, and then they have a clear agenda to reduce, to decarbonize their economies. When you do this, you are in the right path to this contribution, number one. Number two, you do it in your own operation, right? Or you can do it also in your own operation and helping both your suppliers, or in our case, our suppliers and our customers, because this is what we do. right? So you are talking about scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, helping this. So very simple, Edu. We focus on helping our customers and also influencing leaders in countries to have a clear agenda for decarbonize their business and their activities.
Okay.
And maybe to complement on what Raphael was talking about in generic term, if we look at cities, at Schneider, we want to be very practical, as Raphael was saying, and really target buildings, because where city represents roughly 70% of the whole carbon emissions, actually buildings represent a vast majority of that, more than 40%. So we believe that looking at building is really, really important. And buildings today are very, very, very inefficient. They are inefficient from the phase of really the design and construction, where actually we see a lot of opportunities thanks to digitalization to do better simulation of building, to optimize their consumption, to do a better control construction, avoid waste. I mean, cement has a big impact on carbon footprint of buildings. So when you optimize all materials, you actually save on carbon. And then, of course, at the operate phase, where we see a minimum opportunity of 30% energy saving. If I take a very practical example, which is the last building we commissioned in Europe, which is called Intensity, which is an innovation center for Schneider. Actually, thanks to Electricity 4.0 technology, we've been able to deploy a building that consumes 10 times less than the building next door, and 10 times less than the average of Europe, which is roughly 35 kilowatt hour per square meter per year, because the building is very frugal by itself. And because it's frugal and it doesn't need a lot of energy, by just using the top of the building and covering it with solar panel, 4,000 square meters of solar panel for a building that's roughly 25,000 square meters, you end up with a building that's called net zero, meaning over a full year, the building consumes as much energy as it produces energy, which is fantastic. Now, the point is deploy this, and then the detractors say, yeah, but that's very expensive. That's not. That building was 5% more costly than a non-efficient building. And you get your payback in less than 3 years. So the point is back to what Raphael was saying very well, which is we have no time. We have no time and we have the solution. So we just need to move as fast as we can, and here leadership matter to make sure that people are aware, because in many cases we don't move there because people are unaware, and then drive this in the most obvious part of, let's say, the waste, which is really buildings and city.
No, very good, very good. Thank you, Philip. Good to have these examples. So when you talk about cities, we can talk too about electric vehicles. Okay. So what are the prospects in cities decarbonizations about the electric vehicles, Philip?
So on that one, I think there are very encouraging signs. Experts are saying that by 2040, EV should represent roughly 60% of sales. Actually, I think it's going to go faster because the cost of electric vehicle is going down very, very quickly. Actually, the cost to run an electric vehicle is already lower than to operate a gas-operated vehicle. And actually, you have more and more, let's say, younger generation, but not only, who are saying, you know what, I aspire to have a green way of life, and somewhat my car is the simplest demonstration of that commitment. So for all of these reasons, we're actually pretty optimistic about the expansion of this. We already see countries that are role model. And take Norway, which is a country that in some ways not resembles to Brazil because it has a lot of renewable energy, even more than Brazil. So in the case of Norway, 90%, 98% renewable energy. In Norway, 85% of the vehicle are either electric vehicle or hybrid. So it's not anymore an exception. The rule is electric vehicle. And what we really want is help the world move and really drastically pivot or move massively to electric vehicle. For this, EV charging, electric vehicle charging station will be very, very important, of course. And there needs to be some government-led effort to support that. And company needs to be role model into that. At Schneider, we took a commitment that 80% of our vehicle by 2025 will be electric vehicle, and by 2030, 100% of our fleet of vehicle will be electric. So we want to again lead by example with very simple commitment, and make sure that with this we are also helping the whole ecosystem to move towards this electricity for the zero world.
Okay, and Rafael, the electric vehicles, it's a good solution in terms of Brazil too?
Well, Edu, what Philip was mentioning on Norway is not strange to us here in Brazil, right? And I will give you again back to to concrete examples here that we have. Our major distribution center in Brazil is in Cajamar, okay? And with Cajamar, we serve the country, but big part of the business, is in the state of Sao Paulo. So we are already serving our customer in a radius of 250 kilometers with a fleet of electrical vehicles. And guess what? It's not just the young, it's also the mature, the senior people are super happy to be serving their customer in an EV vehicle, right? So all that we have here in the region, 250 kilometers of radio, we are already serving with this. Philip said we are committed in the EV 100 globally to have our fleet by 2030 full electrical. I'm super happy because I'm in a few weeks receiving my hybrid vehicle in Brazil, and this is what we are doing, right? So and not only this is in our fleet in Brazil. So by 2025 we will be 80%, and 2030 100%. But we are also helping, the community and the customer. We have an agreement with a startup in Brazil, Tupinambá, for the EV chargers. And this is basically helping them, because at the end of the day, it's not just the charger, but it's the infrastructure, right? The charger is going into the building, is going into the mall, the shopping malls, is going into the schools, right? And so how we help them to overall look at their infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and have the infrastructure, the chargers, the measuring of this to measure the full impact, and then continue to be more green.
Okay. And so the time is over, but we have time to a final question to both. So in the way to clean electricity and intelligent digitalization, what would you like to see happen over the course of this decade, Philip? Let's talk a little bit about the future for the next years. Or
very, very, very simply, our mission at Schneider is to drive sustainability and efficiency for our customers, because we have a bigger purpose, which is to serve the planet, to serve the fight against climate change. And the first goal we have is by 2030 to cut by 2 carbon emission, to cut by 2 the 35 gigaton of carbon that are going to the atmosphere and damaging long-term the planet. The good news in front of that is solutions do exist. They rely on this electricity 4.0, very simple principle, more electric, more digital. And really the point to worry about is that today there is not the right sense of urgency. So we all need to contribute, and on one side make people aware that one, there is that big emergency, people start to get it, but that in front of that, solutions do exist and they are not science fiction. So journalists, you guys have a big role to play. Companies like us have a big role to play to lead and drive those solutions to fruition, to the ground, so that we really move fast into this low carbon world, this no carbon world. And that's what makes us passionate every day to work at Schneider Electric.
Okay. And Rafael, some final comments?
Edu, I will just complement what Philip said properly, right? It's this have a massive and positive impact into our planet. But let's be clear, these have a greatest impact also into the economy, a positive impact. There is big benefits for companies, for corporations. He mentioned about the intensity building that we have. a 3 years ROI. Basically, when we are helping companies to decarbonize, we are helping them to be more efficient, to reduce their structural costs, and to invest more in developing products and be more efficient at the end of the day, which is good for the economy. It's creating new jobs. There is a transition on this. We need to be honest on it, okay? But the overall impact is a positive impact. So my message is I encourage the business leaders from Brazil, not only big companies, small size, mid size. There is technology, there is benefit for the planet, but there is also a lot of benefit for the economics. And this is what we need to strive. And a country that is green, like our country, like Brazil, will appeal for more investment from the foreign companies.
Okay, thanks a lot. So, Rafael, muitas gracias. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado.
Philippe, merci beaucoup to this conversation. Very good, very good, very good. And now I will finish in Portuguese, okay, for our audience. So, sem dúvida, gente, como todo mundo viu aqui, sem dúvida é um assunto muito necessário, né? Que, obviamente, o mundo precisa reduzir suas emissões de carbono na próxima década. Isso é uma missão super urgente. E a digitalização dos processos que envolve a eletricidade, principalmente nas grandes cidades, seja no tratamento do lixo ou nas redes de distribuição de energia, é algo fundamental. A melhor eficiência dos processos, a partir da tecnologia, poderá muito ajudar as sociedades espalhadas pelo mundo e suas metas de redução de emissões. E as futuras gerações é que vão agradecer muito a tudo isso. Então, nós ficamos por aqui. Até uma próxima oportunidade. Muito obrigado para quem nos acompanhou até agora. Tchau!